I'd like to end the show tonight with a personal story to make people kind of understand my viewpoint on why ideology becomes a bad thing. Um, the WikiLeaks was a nuclear bomb dropped on the DNC. It was unavoidable. It was something that you couldn't look away from. Only the most naive and the most brainwashed, or being paid by the DNC at this point, since we know those people exist now, could ignore what was going on and what was happening. And it made me think back to a conversation I had with my dad right after Barack Obama was elected. You see, there was so much hope in people um, when Barack Obama was elected that people lost their minds because it was something that wasn't supposed to happen. It was something we didn't think was going to happen in our lifetime of a black president. But with it came this untouchable kind of aura that he had, that he was just Superman and going to fix everything, and he was perfect, and the whole shtick. And I remember the night that he was elected, people were celebrating, and I let people have their night, but I was still saying to people, and even myself, he's still a politician. He's not all powerful, and we'll see where this goes. And there were people who bit my head off for saying this, but I figured, you know what? It's the last. I'll let people have this night of hope. And I remember it was a couple weeks later. Me and my dad were hanging out. We had a tumultuous relationship, and so it took a lot for us to get back to where we were talking and semi-friends, and we had somewhat repaired the relationship that had broken down because of abuse at my mother's hands. And the subject of Barack Obama came up while we were sitting at a gas station about how um, this was a new America that wasn't racist, and racial equality is going to happen. And he was talking about Barack Obama like he was some type of genie. And I remember just looking at him confused. My father was one of the most overly logical people I could come across. This was the guy who introduced me to sci-fi, to Star Trek, to Star Wars, to horror movies in general. This was the guy who was my introduction to these themes and ideas and philosophies. And so he was the logical person I had as a kid. And he was saying all of these illogical things, and it took me back because I had to realize that my father, was an ideologue. See, it didn't matter what Barack Obama did. He had been waiting on a black president since he was a kid. He had been waiting on this person who was a dream fulfillment for him his entire life. And it finally happened. And nothing was going to take that away. And throughout the entire 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency, nothing that went wrong was his fault. Nothing was his problem. And I remember that night, he got really, really mad. He got really, really mad because I wouldn't say that he was right. And I was like, no, it's not going to magically change this country, and it's not going to magically end racism. And he got really mad about this. And then a police car pulled up behind us and asked what we were doing there. And if anybody knows me, I had the most shit-eating grin I could possibly ever have on my face as this cop asked for our IDs and informations for simply sitting in a parking lot. Because somebody had called the police on us just sitting in a parking lot. And he looked at me, and it was more anger than I think I'd ever seen in him, that I didn't have to argue my point anymore. I was right. And sometime later, a couple of months later, he actually apologized for getting so upset in that conversation. But it had kind of broken the last shred of maybe like heroism that people like boys kind of have for their fathers, where it's, you know, you look up to him. I really didn't look up to him, and I saw him as a person. The African American community, for since the Southern strategy, has followed the Democratic Party, no matter what wrong it was doing, no matter in the exact same way that my father was doing and had done his entire life. His entire life. And this is the problem with ideology. He was so closed off from the truth and not wanting to accept reality that he was willing to damage his relationship with his son. You know, he's literally the only family I really have left. And it clouds one's judgment beyond anything. And we all have it. We all have a bias in some way, and we have to keep these bias in order. People have, theories and whatnot, but he had become brainwashed by his own ability, his own need to have the thing that he needed be true. And so it was weird going into this week and seeing people that have been Democrats their entire life turn on this party finally and rip everything that was this sham of a convention to shreds. People of every race, every color, every creed. And when it came to understanding what happened, there was an overwhelming sense of dread and fear I had with communicating with my dad. And I had talked to others that, in this chat and whatnot about my fears that I was going to speak with them. I was going to have a conversation with him because he had been pushing for Hillary. He had been pushing for Hillary, and he was not a Bernie supporter. And he was pushing for Hillary because Barack Obama was pushing for Hillary, because it was that easy to sway him. And I didn't want to speak to him. I was dreading speaking to him this week because I was afraid he was just going to brush it aside again, because he had brushed aside, the Hillary email link leaks, with her getting hacked before. Believe the media hype. This was a dude who watches MSNBC religiously. Listens to the radio, their radio station religiously, breathes, eats, and sleeps it. I was terrified. Terrified of speaking with him, and terrified of maybe losing the only person in my life that I share a bloodline with, because he couldn't let go of his ideology. And so I tested the waters, and I sent him a text message, and all I said was, "Dad, I'm voting third party." And he replied to me with a meme of Barack Obama wearing a mustache as as a new third party candidate that's entering the race. And I understood what this was, and I gained some of that respect for him back, because I knew he wasn't too far gone. Just like everybody who was protesting wasn't too far gone to see the writing on the walls and, Chan culture bleeding out into society. My dad replied to me with a goddamn meme, for crying out loud. My dad was not an internet dude. My dad was not on Chans. And it reminded me that people can still speak up and people can still fight. And for 2 years I've felt helpless in fighting against the media, in fighting against corrupt governments, and them never getting called on their crap. And it finally happened in a big way. And I'm seeing people who would have never ever turned away from the Democrats doing so. And so I want to encourage these people that some of them I've badmouthed because of bad decisions they've made or bad ways that they've acted, finally doing the right thing. I want to encourage that. For once, I'm proud of my people. When I originally wrote this, it was out of anger and under the automatic assumption that the American people were not going to hold Hillary Clinton to task and the DNC to task for this. I had to rewrite this whole thing because I made the automatic assumption that my people weren't going to stand up and fight. And you did. So keep doing it. Good luck.